Hello, this is a video of a historical miniatures game representing the Battle of Dreux, put on by myself for our war game group in Dallas, Texas. The game is using 28mm figures on a 6-foot by 10-foot table. We're using my ancient rules, Mediterranean Empires, which is modified for the Renaissance period. The Battle of Dreux was fought on the 19th of December, 1562. This was the only major battle of the First French War of Religion, which occurred during the years of 1562 to 1563. The battle was a royal victory over the Huguenots and is notable because both commanders of the victorious army were captured during the fighting. The Huguenots at the start of the war captured several cities. However, in the summer and fall of 1562, the royal army had recaptured some of these cities. The royal and Catholic commanders believed the war to be over for the year. They had moved parts of their army into winter quarters. On the Huguenot side, the Prince of Condé was at Orleans, and a series of negotiations between the Huguenot leaders and the courts followed. On the 10th of December, after 2 fruitless weeks, the Huguenot army broke camp and marched on Chartres, then changed their plans and moved towards the English in Normandy near Dreux. The royal army was moving in parallel and was able to get across the river Eure and place themselves between the Huguenots and the town of Dreux. The Catholic army contained around 16,000 infantry and 2,000 to 3,000 cavalry with 22 cannon. The estimated size of the Huguenot force varies, with 5,000 to 8,000 infantry and 4,000 to 8,000 cavalry, but generally averaging around 12,000 total men. The French Catholic army was commanded by Duke Anne of Montmorency, the Constable of France, in this case played by Mike Zeismer. Herb Flather will be the Marshal Saint Andre, commanding the right wing, and Bill Flagg will be playing the part of Duke Francois of Guise, who was in command of the cavalry. On the Huguenot side, Bob Smith will be Louis I of Bourbon, the Prince of Condé, as the overall commander. He will have a subordinate in charge of the Lansquenets and French arquebusiers. This part will be played by Calvin Malloy. Admiral Coligny will be in command of the right wing, and Lloyd Acre will be playing his part in the command of the mercenary Black Riders. For the video, I have edited out most of the non-relevant sections and sped the play up by 4 times. The narration over the video is to explain the action you will be seeing. Thank you. It is the first turn of the game. The Royal French are standing stationary on the right, and the French Huguenots are moving their first wing onto the table under Calvin. The second turn starts with the command phase. The various wings are rolling their initiative orders. Then the artillery is going to be checked to see if they are in range. The shooting phase is always before any movement. Then Lloyd is moving the Huguenot second wing onto the table. This wing is made up of pistol-armed heavy cavalry called Black Riders. The Royal French are again standing still. Calvin advances his 2 pike units and his foot arquebusiers. His commander is not very good, and he's moving a half move this turn. The third turn begins with the command phase, as usual. Right now the players are checking various distances, apparently Calvin is, and rolling the dice to see which order the commanders will move in. The next phase is the shooting phase. Herb is measured and found he was out of range. Mike was in range, fired and misses. The movement phase will come up next. Lloyd's Black Riders are moving first, and they advance forward. And of course he forgot his command figure and has to move it up. Bob's wing, this is the third wing of the Huguenots, and he advances forward. This is a wing made up of a gendarme, a large gendarme unit, a unit of mounted arquebusiers, and some foot arquebusiers. And with Bob's wing having been moved onto the table, all of the Huguenot army is on the battlefield. Bill is bringing on the third wing, the last of the Royal French army, onto the table. It is made up of 2 small ordnance cavalry units and a unit of mounted arquebusiers. Calvin now advances his wing into position. Herb deploys his French arquebusiers into open order. And this is the 4th turn of the game, with the command dice being rolled for the various commands to tell what order they will move in. The artillery will be checking their ranges. Herb finds he's in range but misses. Then Mike checks his range and also misses. Bill leads off the movement, moving the Royal French Cavalry forward on the far right. Lloyd will advance his riders forward again. He's moving them up to be able to shoot at the Swiss pike units that are covered by their arquebusiers, forming up his right-hand unit and advancing it to charge the guns next turn. Mike, reacting to this, has moved his arquebusiers back, is in a dilemma, decides to place them into the pikes so that they can fire under cover of the pikes. Otherwise, the riders would be able to charge them and just pick them right off. Bob advances his mounted arquebusiers, doing a double move to get them in range for next turn. He advances up his gendarmes behind their arquebusiers, and then his foot arquebusiers following. And of course, Lloyd gets in the way of the camera. And Calvin has moved his skirmish arquebusiers to his left, worrying about his open left flank. As you can see in the bottom left corner of the screen, it is turn 5. This turn will contain more firing, with the artillery missing yet again. The pistol-armed cavalry will miss the guns, but hurt and disorder the left-hand Swiss pike unit. Bill advances his cavalry using a double move, turning the Huguenots left. And Herb's turn to get in front of the camera for a bit. And again. Bob reacts to Bill's move by wheeling his gendarmes to face the new threat. At the same time, he'll advance his foot arquebusiers. Mike arranges his foot arquebusiers in an open order. Lloyd charges the guns. The gunners flee instead of evading, and Lloyd, blocking the camera, moves the pistol-armed formed cavalry unit, chasing the gunners but fails to reach them. Then he'll advance his riders up to get in closer range of the Swiss, realizing that the Swiss are not in order. Mike should have fixed that on his turn, and we go back and he does fix it. At the start of the next turn, the card wasn't flipped, but it does become turn 6. During the command phase, the players again roll their various initiative dice. This step is followed by Mike spending a command point in an attempt to rally his fleeing gunners. With the command point, he succeeds. The gunners flee one more move, then rally. During the shooting phase, the Swiss lose a stand and become disordered again. Not much else happens during the shooting. During the movement, Bob advances his mounted arquebusiers while Lloyd wheels his formed riders to charge the distorted Swiss next turn. He is ignoring the rallied gunners. However, to keep pressure on the disordered Swiss, he charges the reiters into their formation. Bill moves his mounted arquebusiers to the left, while Mike has the French foot form up to face Bob's mounted arquebusiers. Bill, continuing his move, charges Calvin's unformed arquebusier screen. Calvin's troops evade out of the immediate reach. Calvin and Herb both tidy up their skirmishers. Mike's debating what to do on his turn, trying to figure out the odds of his Swiss pike winning against the riders. It's fairly even. And Lloyd points out that he's got a cavalry unit to his left that is adding pressure to the Swiss. These are moved forward to illustrate this better. They are close enough that the pikes can charge them, however. Since Mike was moving after Lloyd, Mike is trying to decide what to do with his other Swiss unit. Right now he's showing that he's able to affect the fight to his left with the formed Swiss unit, but debating whether or not to charge the riders. And he makes the decision to charge the riders, who evade falling back. They are in a looser order formation and not able to stand up against the pikes and not able to charge them. The fight between the riders and the Swiss start, arranging how many dice each side will roll. Lloyd throws in his general into the fight to give himself another dice, and the Swiss lose very badly, taking many hits, losing a stand, and rolling very poorly and fleeing from the fight. As they flee from the fight, Lloyd comes over to get in front of the camera and moves his riders with Bill's assistance into pursuing the broken Swiss, which will take the Swiss out of the game permanently. Mike belatedly rolls and kills Lloyd's general. Turn 7 starts with the initiative rolls. During this step, the fleeing Swiss should have been moved again, then removed from the game, and Lloyd's general should have been moved to one of his units. At the moment, the players are just placing the various command dice. The artillery is being fired, and Mike's checking the shooting for his unit against Bob's arquebusers. The two sides exchange fire, with Bob's unit falling back from the fire. Lloyd's showing that his general has a command dice beside him with a 4 on it, showing that his command level is very poor this turn because he lost his general last turn. Mike shoots at my riders and misses. We finally catch up with the correct order of the movement, and the Swiss are removed from the table, and the riders follow them off the board and then run into the French camp, where they will be looting the camp and unable to participate in the combat for a while. Mike advances his arquebus foot to put more pressure on the on Bob's mounted arquebusers. Bob decides to spread his dragoons out, his mounted arquebusers, and then advance his gendarmes to be in reach of Bill's ordnance cavalry next turn. Much shuffling of papers, and Lloyd's turn comes, and he advances forward his riders on one side and wheels his riders on the other side, which is all that he's allowed to do this turn. And at this point, the camera memory runs out, and we have only a snippet of what's left, and I will explain the rest of it over the photograph of the end of the battle. This is the last snippet that the camera had before it lost the rest of its memory. This is showing Bob's gendarme cavalry just above his hand there, having contacted Bill's ordnance cavalry. The two will fight for several turns over there, but what's not being shown is Bill's mounted arquebusers over by Bob's other hand, having broken through the center of the French Huguenot line. They had routed a French foot arquebuser unit, and on the other side of the field, Calvin's arquebuser unit had also routed while trying to evade. So the French Huguenots went from a fairly good position to almost a losing position in one instance from both units evading. Now I am going to the photograph of the end of the battle. This is how the table was set up after the battle was over. The Swiss in the center have advanced into the middle of the French Huguenot army, trying to get away from the riders who have been mercilessly shooting them down without them being able to reply. The riders have gotten on the flank and the rear of the Swiss and fired at them many turns, and the Swiss have started marching away from them instead of just being butchered where they stood. Their arquebusers are not heavy enough, are willing to get out of the formation to face the riders. They're too outnumbered. The ordnance cavalry up at the top of the screen have defeated the Huguenot gendarmes and that was the last straw that broke the Huguenot army. So this is a photograph of the table at the end of the game when the Huguenots have had to start withdrawing because their army morale has broken, giving the French a fairly clear victory, having only lost one Swiss pike unit.